The tires hummed softly beneath us, winding up through the thin-spined roads of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The windows were down, letting in the crisp, pine-scented air, and Mason had one arm draped loosely over the wheel, like he'd been born to drive through nowhere. "Didn't think your little Prius would make it past the first bend?" he teased, shooting me a quick grin. I smirked, pretending not to notice the way my stomach flipped whenever he looked at me like that. "It's got more fight than you give it credit for." Mason laughed and reached for the Bluetooth. Yeah. Let me guess. Road trip playlist includes Bon Iver and emotional self-reflection tracks. He wasn't wrong. Still, I leaned my head against the window and let the fading golden hour paint the sky in soft oranges and purples. The deeper we drove into the woods, the quieter things got. I didn't mind the silence, not really, but it was the kind that made you think too much. We'd been seeing each other for 3 months now. Casual dinners, occasional sleepovers, movie nights that started with popcorn and ended with his leg pressed against mine on the couch. There were never labels, never questions. Just a mutual rhythm, like we both knew not to lean too far in, not to push too hard. At least, not yet. But lately, I'd been wondering, what were we, really? He'd texted me 3 days ago, "You free this weekend? Want to get away?" Just us. Now here we were, winding higher into the mountains with 2 backpacks, a tent, and a cooler full of beer, and my heart doing backflips. I didn't know how to stop. Mason reached over and tapped my knee lightly. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" He gave me that half smile, the thinking face. "You look like you're trying to solve the meaning of life." Just ... zoning out. I lied. He let it slide. We stopped at a scenic overlook. Mason killed the engine and stepped out, stretching like a cat in the fading light. The view was breathtaking, layers of dark forest tumbling down into fog-laced valleys. I stayed in the car a second longer, watching him through the windshield. Mason had a way of fitting into the world so easily, like the outdoors belonged to him. He wore his warmth like an old hoodie, effortless and familiar. I'd always admired that about him. The way he could crack a joke and put a whole room at ease. The way he could sit in silence and somehow make it feel ... safe. I joined him at the edge. He didn't say anything right away, just stood beside me, his hands in his pockets, his eyes on the horizon. "You ever think about how quiet the world gets when you climb high enough?" he asked. I nodded. "It's like the noise doesn't make it up this far." "Exactly." He glanced sideways at me. "Sometimes I feel like I need the quiet, otherwise I can't hear anything real." Something about the way he said it settled in my chest. I looked over at him, really looked. Wind tousling his dark hair, jawline sharp in the golden light. That soft crease between his brows he got when he was trying to seem chill, but was thinking too hard. I wanted to ask him why now, why this trip, why me? But instead, I said, "Thanks for inviting me." He turned to me, that smile flickering again. "There's no one else I'd want here." And for a second, I didn't breathe. Because sometimes, it's not the words themselves, it's the way someone says them. Like they mean something more, but don't know how to say it out loud yet. We stood there until the sun dipped below the trees, and the air turned cooler. Then Mason clapped his hands. "Together. All right, city boy. Let's see if you can build a fire without burning your eyebrows off." I laughed and followed him back to the car. But in the back of my mind, I wondered, was this still just a weekend away? Or the start of something neither of us was brave enough to name? By the time we pitched the tent and unloaded the gear, twilight had folded itself over the mountains like a blanket. Mason built the fire with practiced ease, stacking logs and blowing gently until orange embers crackled to life. I handed him a lighter and watched the glow flicker across his face. "Look at you," I teased, "mountain man in his natural habitat." He shot me a smug grin. "Years of Boy Scouts, baby." I didn't just show up for the cookies. We roasted hot dogs over the fire, talked about college stories, the worst jobs we'd ever had, the weirdest people we'd dated. It was easy with him, always had been. That's what scared me. How easy it felt. How natural. Later, we wrapped up in separate fleece blankets and leaned close to the fire. The stars were sharp and loud overhead, like someone had tossed diamonds across black velvet. The wind was picking up, threading between the trees like a ghost. Mason stretched his legs toward the fire and groaned. God, my calves are shot. That hike murdered me. I glanced down. He was pulling off his boots with a grunt, shaking them out and wiggling his toes. You're too young to be complaining like that, I said, nudging him. Tell that to my legs, he muttered. They've aged 10 years in 2 hours. I might not survive the hike back. I hesitated for half a second, then said casually, Want me to rub them? He blinked. What? Your calves? I've got decent hands. Might help. He paused, like he was considering if it meant anything more than it sounded like. Then he said, Yeah, actually, that'd be awesome. I moved closer on the log, Benj sitting sideways to face him, and tugged his blanket up to his knees. He had on thick wool socks, and his jeans were rolled a little. I started slow, pressing my thumbs gently into the muscle just above his ankle, working upward with light, rhythmic pressure. Damn, he breathed, head tilting back. You're hired. I chuckled. I only work in remote forests. Sorry. For a while, it was just the fire crackling and the hush of wind through pine needles. My hands moved in slow circles, warm against the coolness of his skin. I wasn't even sure what I was doing anymore, whether I was still offering comfort or seeking something. Our knees touched barely, but neither of us shifted away. I risked a glance at his face. His eyes were half closed, lashes resting against his cheeks, and the firelight lit his jaw in gold. His breath rose visibly in the chill, curling softly in front of him. I had the irrational urge to reach up and trace his collarbone. He opened one eye slowly and met my gaze. You're quiet. Just ... focused, I said. He nodded, but something had changed. The energy had shifted, and we both felt it. I kept massaging slower now. I could feel the tension in his calves giving way to something else, maybe tension he didn't even realize he was holding. Feels good, he murmured, not looking at me. My throat felt tight. Yeah, beat then, quieter. You're really good at this. I let the silence stretch, unsure how to step away from it now that we were in it. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees, making the fire sway. Mason shifted slightly, his leg brushing against my thigh. His breath hitched, or maybe mine did. I wasn't sure, and suddenly the space between us felt too small. The kind of closeness that used to mean nothing, knees bumping, fingers grazing, now carried weight. My hands slowed. I didn't know where to place them next. He looked at me again, this time fully. There was no smirk, no teasing, just a strange softness in his eyes, like he was seeing something for the first time and wasn't sure what to do with it. I pulled my hands back slowly, resting them in my lap. My skin tingled where I'd touched him. Mason didn't say anything. Neither did I. We just sat there, wrapped in firelight and quiet, 2 blankets barely brushing. And even though nothing had been said, I felt the truth pressing against us, like the night errant spoken, undeniable. Something subtle had shifted, and there was no going back now. The fire died down slower than I thought it would. We lingered outside until the stars sharpened, and the cold finally bit through the layers. Neither of us said much after the massage. There was a quiet, mutual understanding, a breath held between 2 people afraid to exhale. Mason unzipped the tent and climbed in first, grumbling playfully about the cold in his grandpa knees. I followed, ducking into the cramped space. Our sleeping bags were already laid out, side by side, zipped and padded with foam mats underneath. It wasn't much, but it was warm, and the air carried the earthy scent of pine and damp soil. I slipped into mine, and zipped up. The material rustled loudly in the stillness. Our shoulders almost touched. "Good job today, trail guide," he mumbled, his voice drowsy. "Thanks," I said quietly. The moonlight glowed faintly through the tent fabric, casting gentle shadows. I could just make out Mason's profile, his brows soft, hair tousled, mouth relaxed as he blinked up at the ceiling. After a few minutes, he spoke again, voice slow and sleepy. "You ever think about quitting everything? Like just disappearing into the woods or something?" I smiled faintly. "Only on Mondays." He chuckled, then sighed. "I'm not ready for Monday." "Don't think about it yet," I murmured. "We're still here." Silence settled again, but my mind didn't. I watched him as his breathing slowed, his features relaxing into sleep. I could hear the slight whistle of his breath. Something inside me twisted. Being this close physically should have made me feel safe, anchored. Instead, I felt like I was floating too high, like one wrong move would send me crashing. What were we? A few weeks of casual dating. Kisses that stopped before they meant too much. Jokes to fill the space where deeper things should have gone. I'd told myself not to get too attached, that Mason wasn't ready, that I wasn't either, and yet, here we were, in a tent on a mountain, breathing the same cold air, saying everything and nothing. I turned on my side, careful not to rustle too loud, and stared at him. The moonlight painted a soft edge along his cheekbone. He looked younger like this, or maybe just real. The version of him that didn't always have a joke locked and loaded. I wanted to reach over, not to kiss him, just to touch him, just to know I could. But ID and single quotes. Eventually, sleep took me by. Morning. The forest was soaked in dew. Birds chirped above like an orchestra warming up. I crawled out of the tent, stiff and cold, and Mason followed a few minutes later. Hair messy, hoodie zipped to his chin. We packed light and set out early. The trail curved up through a narrow ridge, flanked by rocks and shrubs dusted with last night's frost. I walked behind him most of the way, watching the steady rhythm of his steps. The occasional glance he tossed over his shoulder to make sure I was keeping up. I still hadn't said anything about the night before. Neither had he, but it hovered between us, invisible and constant. Halfway up, we hit a steep patch of narrow ledge with loose rock. I slipped, catching myself on a root, and cursed under my breath. Mason turned quickly and reached out his hand. "Here." I took it without thinking. His grip was strong, warm, familiar. He pulled me up, but his hand didn't drop right away. Instead, it rested on my shoulder for a second too long. His thumb brushed, lightly accidental or not. I couldn't tell. Our eyes met. He didn't smile. Neither did I. But something passed between us in that glance, something wordless, tight with meaning. Then he cleared his throat and stepped back, dusting his palms on his jeans. "You good?" "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded smaller than I meant it to. We walked the next stretch in silence, boots crunching over gravel, wind stirring the trees high above. I kept thinking about that, touch his hand on my shoulder, his thumb grazing me like maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe he did feel it too. Maybe he just didn't know what to do with it. By the time we reached the overlook, the clouds had lifted, and the view stretched for miles, layer after layer of rolling green and soft mist. He stood beside me, close enough that our jackets brushed. I wanted to say something, ask him if this still felt casual to him, if he thought about last night the way I had, but all I said was, "Beautiful." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, it really is." I glanced sideways. He was already looking at me. Then he looked away, but not before I saw it, the quiet, searching look in his eyes, like he wanted to say something, too. We should have checked the sky. The air had felt strange, all day thick, to still. But it wasn't until we reached the narrow stretch past the ridge that the clouds rolled in, like a warning. Gray, fast, low. "Shit," Mason muttered, glancing up. Thunder cracked somewhere distant. deep and rolling like a growl from the earth's chest. We turned fast, slipping down the slope, packs bouncing against our backs. The wind picked up needling cold, urgent. Then the first drops came, big, scattered, heavy. Then all at once, by the time we made it back to camp, we were soaked. Mason threw the tent flap open, and we dove in like two kids dodging trouble, breathless and laughing. "Holy hell," he wheezed, tugging his pack off. "We barely made it. Dude, my socks are soup," I groaned, flopping onto my mat. Water squelching in my boots. Outside, the rain beat down in thick sheets, drumming the nylon like frantic fingers. Lightning flared behind the trees. Thunder cracked again, closer. Now, inside the tent, it was barely warmer, but the shared breath, the frantic closeness felt safe. Mason peeled off his soaked hoodie with effort, yanking it over his head. His shirt clung to him, nearly transparent, and he kicked off his jeans, leaving just boxers. I turned away quickly, pretending to fumble with my own boots. "Sorry," he muttered. "I'm not trying to be weird, dime, just freezing." "It's fine," I said too fast. My heart was thudding too hard. My hands were wet, not just from rain. I finally dared to glance back. He was sitting cross-legged on his mat, hair dripping, cheeks flushed, arms wrapped loosely around his knees. He looked like something out of a dream, disheveled, quiet, raw. He caught my eyes and didn't look away. The laughter had faded. Outside, the storm kept raging, but inside the tent, the world had shrunk to the space between us. I shivered. Mason noticed. "Here," he said, reaching toward the pile of emergency blankets. "We should both dry off." He tossed me one, then unrolled another for himself. We wrapped up in silence, knees nearly touching, backs against the damp nylon wall. I could feel his body heat bleeding into the air between us. He glanced over again. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded. "Yeah, just adrenaline and something else. Something that had nothing to do with the storm." His hand reached toward mine, hesitant, then touched the back of it, lightly, just a brush of fingers. "You sure?" he asked again. I looked down at our hands. My skin burned where he touched me. "Yeah," I said, my voice thinner than I expected, but I didn't move. Neither did he. The rain roared above us. The wind rattled the tent poles, but we sat there, barely breathing, like we were afraid to break. Whatever had settled between us. His thumb moved slightly, tracing a small circle over my knuckle. Not accidental. I looked up. He was already watching me. His expression wasn't teasing. It wasn't guarded. It was open in a way I'd never seen, like something had finally cracked. His voice, when it came, was quiet. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Do you ever think about this? Us?" The question knocked the air out of me. I swallowed. "Sometimes." His hand squeezed mine slightly. "Me too." We didn't say more. We didn't need to. The silence filled in the blanks. I studied his face, the way water clung to his lashes. The tension in his jaw, like even saying that much, had cost him something. And yet, he wasn't pulling back. Neither was I. He shifted. A little closer, his knee now pressing against mine. I didn't flinch. "I didn't plan on this," he whispered. "Me neither." More thunder. A flash of lightning cast the tent in pale light. Mason's hand left mine and found the edge of my blanket. He gently tugged it, so it overlapped with his, covering both of us. It felt symbolic somehow. Small, big, everything. "I think about the way you look at me," he said, still not meeting my eyes. "I notice it." I blinked, frozen. "I didn't think you did." "I tried not to," he said, then finally met my gaze. "But lately, it's hard to pretend." The tent shrank. My chest felt tight. "I don't know what we're doing," I whispered. "I'm scared to push it. I don't want to mess up whatever this is." "I know," he said. "Me too." His hand moved again slowly, hesitantly, until his fingers touched the side of my face. His palm was still damp, but warm. I leaned into it. Just a little. That was all it took. He didn't kiss me. Not yet. But the space between us was gone. Whatever. Line had been drawn. Their silent, invisible it was crossed. Gently, quietly, irrevocably, we sat there, side by side, breathing in sync. The storm wiled around us. But inside the tent, all I could hear was him. The storm had thinned to a gentle patter by nightfall, like the sky had finally let go of whatever it was holding in. The air inside the tent still carried that charged, damp scent of rain-soaked earth and pine. Everything felt muted, hushed, like the world outside had gone still to let something else unfold. We'd barely spoken since that moment earlier, his hand on my face, our breath twined in the small space between sleeping bags. After that, we just sat, quiet, wrapped in a silence that wasn't uncomfortable, just full. Now Mason lay stretched across his mat, one arm folded under his head, the other draped over his stomach. His hoodie was tossed in the corner, his socks drying near the door flap, and his legs bare from mid-thigh down rested, loose and heavy in the shared glow of our battery lantern. "Man," he groaned, shifting slightly, "my calves are wrecked." I looked over. He glanced toward me, then gave a small, knowing smile. "Think you could work your magic again?" I swallowed. "Yeah, sure." He rolled slightly to give me space. "Don't be afraid to go higher this time. I trust you." The words landed, with more weight than he probably meant. I moved toward him slowly, positioning myself cross-legged at his side. My hands hovered over his legs for a moment, unsure, then settled lightly, just above his ankles. His skin was warm, damp. The leftover heat of the storm and the softness of drying skin made every inch feel too real under my fingers. I started slow pressing gently into the backs of his calves, feeling the resistance of tight muscle. He exhaled, long and steady, eyes drifting closed. Neither of us said a word. My fingers moved upward in slow, firm strokes. His thighs were partially exposed, and my hands edged closer, pushing carefully past the line we hadn't crossed before. My heart pounded. The sound of rain outside faded beneath the thudding in my ears. Mason's breathing shifted deeper, heavier. His legs parted slightly. Not a lot, but enough to show he wasn't pulling back. Still, he didn't look at me. I was painfully aware of every motion, every inch of skin, every breath between us. My hand slowed as I reached the middle of his thigh. Then I stopped. He opened his eyes, looked at me. That look, half fear, half clarity, knocked the air out of me. He sat up slowly, resting on one arm, his face inches from mine. The tent seemed to shrink around us, the walls folding in, wrapping us in a moment that had been building since the car ride up. "You feel this too, right?" he asked quietly. My breath caught. "Yeah," I whispered. "I do." He didn't move right away. Neither did I, but everything had shifted. He reached up, slowly, like he didn't want to startle me, and touched the side of my neck, just a thumb resting near my jaw. His eyes never left mine. Then, finally softly, almost hesitantly, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't some perfectly timed music-swelling moment. It was clumsy, damp, breathless. A collision of fear and longing, wrapped in the warmth of everything we'd never said. But it was real. His lips were soft against mine, gentle at first, like he was checking to see if I'd pull away. I didn't. I leaned in. My hand found the curve of his neck. His fingers slid into my hair. The kiss deepened, slow and cautious and unpracticed, like we were figuring it out one breath at a time. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads rested together. The lantern flickered slightly beside us. Neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was full. Like the air didn't need sound anymore. He exhaled a soft, nervous laugh. "That wasn't supposed to happen." "Yeah," I said, smiling faintly. "It kind of was." He pulled back slightly, eyes searching mine. "I've been trying not to want this. You know, like if I kept it light, it couldn't get messy. It already got messy. He laughed again, quieter this time. Yeah, I looked at him. Flushed cheeks, his rain-curled hair, the small crease between his brows that only showed up when he felt too much. I didn't think you'd ever. I started, then stopped. He nodded. I didn't think I would either. Outside, the wind shifted, rustling the trees like an exhale. Inside. We sat there close, bare-kneed, hearts loud in our chests. Mason leaned his head on my shoulder. So now what? I don't know, I said honestly, but I don't want to pretend anymore. His fingers reached for mine, and this time, when our hands met, it wasn't accidental. We lay there for a while quiet, side by side, the storm long faded but something else still hanging in the air. The small battery-powered flashlight glowed between us, casting soft light across the curve of Mason's jaw, the slope of his collarbone. He was lying on his back, one arm tucked beneath his head, the other resting close to mine, but not touching. For a while, we didn't speak. Maybe we were afraid words would ruin it, or maybe there was nothing left to say just yet. Then, softly, he said, I've wanted to kiss you like that since we first met. I turned toward him. He wasn't smiling, just watching the ceiling of the tent like it held all the answers. You could have fooled me, I said, half a laugh under my breath. I know, he murmured. I tried to. I studied his profile, the way his eyes reflected the soft light. Why? He shrugged gently. Because I liked what we had. It was simple, easy, and I've messed up a lot of things by wanting too much, too fast. I turned onto my side, facing him more fully. I thought I was the only one who felt that. He finally looked at me. You're not? The silence returned, but this time it felt softer, like an old blanket pulled over both of us. I exhaled slowly. I think I was scared. Not of you, of what it would mean if I let myself want this. What does it mean? He asked. I hesitated. That I'd have something to lose. Mason reached over, brushing his fingers just barely against mine. You already do. That line landed somewhere deep in my chest. We lay there, eyes locked, the flashlight between us humming softly. Then he said, You know I booked this trip because I wanted something to change. I blinked. You did. He nodded. I didn't have a plan. I just thought, maybe if we got away from everything, away from our routines, our people, it might make it easier to see what this is. And what is it? He looked at me carefully. I don't know, but I know it feels real. It did. More real than anything I'd let myself believe in for a long time. I reached for the flashlight and clicked it off. Darkness fell like a soft curtain, and the sound of the forest rose around us, distant crickets, a breeze tugging the trees, the quiet pulse of night. Mason shifted closer. We didn't speak again for a long time, not because we didn't want to, but because silence was enough. We lay chest to chest, the heat of his breath warming the hollow of my neck. Our legs tangled gently beneath the blankets. His hand rested lightly on my waist. My fingers curled near his ribs. I could feel his heartbeat. It was steady. So was mine. We whispered a few things about exes who'd left too soon, about moments when we'd both thought this could be something, but didn't want to hope. Mason told me he hadn't had anything serious since college. I told him I usually pulled away when things got close. Neither of us tried to impress the other. There was no performative vulnerability, just truth, passed like secrets in the dark. He laughed softly at one point. We such cliches. Two emotionally repressed guys needing a thunderstorm and a tent to finally talk. I smiled. It works though. Yeah, he said. It really does. Eventually, his fingers slid into mine again. No one else existed. Not the road home. Not the world outside. Just him. Just me. Just this. There was no plan, no label, no declaration. Just a shared warmth in the middle of nowhere. And that, for tonight, was everything. Morning came soft. No storm. No tension in the air. just light pale and golden filtering through the mesh panels of the tent. I opened my eyes to the slow rustling of trees, birdsong echoing somewhere high above, and the quiet rhythm of Mason's breath beside me. He was still asleep, one arm across his chest, the other loosely curled near where my hand had rested hours before. I didn't move right away. I just watched him. His face was calm in a way I'd never seen, like something had settled inside him, or maybe inside me. And in that stillness, I felt it too, whatever weight I'd been carrying, the confusion, the fear, the wondering, it had lightened. We got up slowly, quietly, no rush to speak, no pressure to define. Just small smiles passed back and forth, between shared sips of coffee from a tin mug, our hands brushing now and then. Familiar and unafraid. Packing was quieter than I expected, but not the awkward kind. It was more like reverence. Like we both knew we were putting something away we didn't want to lose. The tent came down. The mats were rolled. Everything tucked back into the packs with an unspoken agreement. This weekend had been more than we planned for. We hit the trail just as the sun crested the eastern trees, casting long shadows behind us. Mason walked ahead for the first mile or so, his boots finding the familiar rhythm of the path. I followed, watching the swing of his shoulders, the ease in his posture. Occasionally, he glanced back to make sure I was keeping up, not out of habit, but out of care. Halfway down, we reached a clearing wide and quiet, overlooking the valley we'd hiked above for 2 days. The view was even better in daylight. "Let's stop here," Mason said, already shrugging off his pack. I dropped mine too, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. We stood side by side, the breeze tugging at our sleeves, the scent of pine thick and sweet in the air. I felt his hand before I saw it trapping lightly around my waist. He leaned his head gently against mine. "We should do this again." I turned to him. "The trail?" "No," he said softly. "This us." I didn't say anything for a moment. I didn't have the right words, but I nodded, because even without a name for it, I knew what we had wasn't fleeting. He smiled at me. Cool. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, but it felt real, and it felt enough. We stayed there a little longer, just looking out, letting the silence hold us in place before the world could take us back. Eventually, we finished the hike and reached the car. The air felt warmer now, the sky a clean, unmarred blue. Mason unlocked the doors, tossing his bag into the back. I was about to climb into the passenger side when he paused. Standing between the open doors, he looked at me, and then he kissed me. Again, right there, in the dirt lot under the sun, where the gravel crunched and the trees swayed and no one was watching. He kissed me, not urgently, not possessive lie, just with certainty. Like it didn't have to be hidden anymore. When he pulled back, I felt something in me settle. "I'm starving," he said with a crooked grin. "Hope that diner's still open." I laughed. "Same one? From the drive up?" "Yeah," he said, starting the car. Felt like a good luck spot. We didn't talk much on the ride down, just let the windows down and let the wind take whatever unspoken things we didn't know how to say yet. I texted my sister at a red light. "I think I'm in something real." Her reply came before the light turned green. "It's about time." I smiled. Mason glanced over at me. "Good news?" "Yeah," I said. "The best." Later that night, after the drive home and the unpacking and the soft, too long hug at my apartment door, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The city sounded different now, quieter, like something had shifted even here. I thought about the way he looked at me on the overlook, the way our hands had finally fit together without hesitation, the way he'd said us like it was something he could picture lasting longer than just a weekend in the woods. Maybe we didn't have a label, maybe we didn't need one yet, but I knew this wasn't temporary, not a fling, not a phase. It was the start of something true, and somewhere I hoped he was lying in bed too, thinking the same thing. The wind outside my window picked up gentle this time, and I finally slept without wondering where I stood.